joined my first board just over 10 years ago. And the truth is, I, in many ways, did not embody the candidate, and I continue to consider myself an unconventional board member. I was 39 years old, in that sense, relatively young compared to the average board age. I am Black, from Africa, and I'm a woman. And in general, the representation on boards didn't at that time really have people like me. The other aspect, which I think was really crucial, is I didn't come from the C-suite. Very often boards are looking for people who have had tremendous experience as CEOs or CFOs of large global and complex organizations. So in that respect, the chairman of the different companies whose boards I joined were really taking a flyer on me. Since then, I have had a decade of incredible experience. I have had the trauma of a CEO chairman dying while in office. We've had a company get taken over for $100 billion in 2016, the largest transaction of that year. I've had activists in a stock where I was on the board, which can be incredibly disruptive. It can have some constructive aspects, but from terms of mind share and distraction, it can be a very, very big drag on management's time if not managed well. I've had expropriated assets. I've had to fire a number of CEOs, very often, not all the time, but very often for ethical infringements. I've also had a situation where we've had a stock price go from nearly $60 down to $7 and really generate a lot of concern that the company wouldn't survive. Thankfully, I can assure you that the company is still around and a going concern. So it's been a wild ride for 10 years. I've learned a tremendous amount and been very grateful for the opportunity, but it has really refined my thinking about how complex these organizations are and how we need everyone at the table, government, corporations, civil society, in order to solve some of the biggest challenges that the world faces today. I was trying to solve two problems in writing my new book, How Boards Work. The first problem is a macro problem, which is really talking about what the role of corporations is and should be in the 21st century. And so the book talks a lot about the challenges that boards and corporations face in trying to recalibrate and reassert the importance of corporations at a time when there are greater demands on what the board and the corporate mandate actually are. The second thing I was trying to address with this book was really a sense that there was a blind spot or a lack of information as to what exactly the board does. And this was true and became very clear to me in conversations with students in MBA classes, employees at the companies where I serve on the board, but also more generally with friends and family. There was a sort of a negative narrative about boards. They thought it was a group of people who just played golf and drank fine wines and really didn't understand what the board mandate was. And so I wanted to be very clear on not only what the mandate was, which is basically three things which I delve into in the book, but also to explain why it's so difficult and so challenging to do a lot of things that people think should be easy and straightforward, such as maybe firing a CEO or implementing some of the big ESG agenda questions that are very pervasive these days. The really surprising thing for me was really trying to articulate the trade-offs that board members and corporations face on a day-to-day basis. There is definitely a sense out there in speaking to people that they think boards and corporations are not aligned with societal needs. They think that boards have a relatively easy job in terms of dictating what the responsibilities of the company should be. trying to bring people along to help them understand that actually this is a very complicated, very difficult job, which is fraught with mistakes and a lot at risk, was an area that was quite surprising to me. I thought that people would be much more sort of au fait with what corporations do and what limitations they have. It is absolutely true that a world of more digitization and greater pressure from social demands is making it much more challenged for boards to think about their mandate and how to navigate corporations through these challenged periods. However, and I think COVID-19 is a great example of this, the best corporations are managing their businesses. And by that, I mean in terms of really foundational aspects of having good controls, strong balance sheets, and super well run operations in terms of people, operational staff, etc. Those aspects, when they are bedded down, they will work regardless of the broader economic environment. One of my CEOs often uses the term winning in all environments. And I like that because we don't know what the challenge is, whether they're macroeconomic, a pandemic, economic, or geopolitical, what challenges may emerge. But our responsibility as a board and as senior business leaders is to make sure that we have not only risk mitigated in the way companies run, but are constantly making sure that regardless of what gets thrown at us, the companies can continue to operate. It is clear that it's not just about racial diversity or gender diversity. The broader lens of diversity, having people with different perspectives, whether it's from geopolitical backgrounds and public policy backgrounds, academe and scientists, bringing those into the boardroom so that it just doesn't just reflect business people, is clearly something that I believe is beneficial to the organization. And the best corporations will continue to think about adding diverse voices and perspectives to the boardroom, particularly given the range of challenges from geopolitics and macroeconomics, social and cultural challenges, as well as the environment that the world is facing today. The last point I think that is worth stressing is, notwithstanding the importance of having diversity in the boardroom, it is patently clear to me that you want the boardroom to be at least 40% populated by people who have been in the CEO seat previously. What is clear is that for the CEO of a large, complex, and global organizations in particular, they are essentially are looked up to, and they need to be able to go somewhere to find counsel, support, and objective perspectives from people who've essentially been in that specific role and seat before. I think one of the things that I would say to existing board members is that we shouldn't flatter ourselves. Other boards before us have had, I would argue, even greater challenges. I mean, think for a moment of trying to run a business during the middle of a civil war, or indeed World War I or World War II. I mean, that would have been incredibly challenging. And so, I think that we are in a challenged environment, but I'm very optimistic that we can actually do something that will continue to drive better business over a longer period of time. With respect to new board members, I think the salient point here is for them to understand the three key aspects or the mandate of the board and the levers that boards have in order to effect change. One is to oversee the strategy of the company, and we do this by having a full-on strategy day. It's usually 2 or 3 days, but also we do that by regularly through short-term strategy planning, medium-term strategy planning, as well as long-term strategy planning. The second area, which is critically important, is to hire and or in some instances fire the CEO. This is a very, very important aspect because the relationship between the CEO and the board is critical. in terms of a trust relationship, but honestly defines also, the CEO defines also the cultural aspects of how a company operates. It's a very delicate thing because traditionally we've focused on financial, operational, past experience. One of the things I talk about in the book right now is that we're going to need much more perspective on the ethical history of CEOs as we think about them as candidates. We have a lot of responsibility and a great opportunity to effect change in the organization by who we hire in terms of the leadership of the company, but also through compensation. And more, I'm pleased to see for many boards and many companies are now actually adding a large piece of sort of the social aspects, cultural aspects into the weighting that contributes into compensation. The third role of the board is this cultural frontier. And which I, in the book, separate into two parts. The part about non-negotiables, things like excellence, professionalism, those are not things that I think we quibble about. And then there's this new cultural frontier aspect, which are much more challenged and have a whole array of trade-offs associated with them. So my advice to the incoming and people who are interested in joining boards is that you're joining a board at a time, as someone once said to me, you're joining at the time it's in the middle of a movie. Boards have existed for a long time. There's a lot of scope for improvement, but fundamentally there's an important role that boards have played, do play, and will continue to play, to my mind. And the best new board members are ones that bring fresh perspectives, but also understand the subtlety and the more nuanced challenges that corporations and boards face.